Hello, fellow food enthusiasts. I'm Angela Taylor, the owner of Indulge Boise, and I am the host of Culinary Chats with Indulge Boise, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to the show. Similar to the culinary experiences that we curate with Indulge Boise on our food tours, here on Culinary Chats with Indulge Boise, we're going to be embarking on what I like to think a little delicious journey through Boise and all of Idaho's culinary landscape. We'll be guided by the brilliant minds that are shaping its evolution. From these innovative chefs to visionary restaurateurs to passionate brewers, dedicated farmers, and more, we're going to be uncovering what I think is the heartbeat of this culinary movement. It's one of the things that really drew me to the food tour scene, and one of the things that we are endeavoring to do through Indulge Boise is to tell the story of the different neighborhoods, of the restaurants, of the culture, the architecture, the history of those neighborhoods. So what I invite you all to do today is to go ahead and settle in and join us as we try to unveil the stories and the voices that are the heartbeat of the culinary scene here in Idaho and Boise specifically. The voices that breathe life into this vibrant community. And so I hope you expect not just a little bit of a feast for the palate, but also some food for thoughts and some soul enriching conversation. And it's a pleasure to have you here with us. Now, before I introduce today's guest, which I am really excited about introducing to you all and being in conversation in, I want to take a moment to actually delve into his extremely impressive background. His culinary journey is one that is what I like to think of a tapestry that's been woven with fascinating endeavors and award-winning flair. And over the years, he's truly made his mark on Idaho's culinary landscape. So without further ado, let me tell you a little bit more about today's guest, Kris Komori. Kris is chef and co-owner of Kin and Art House Bar located in downtown Boise. He's been in the restaurant industry consistently for 22 years, starting as a dishwasher and moving all throughout the front and back of house before eventually opening his own establishment, Kin. He helped co-found a nonprofit called City of Good and is a local food enthusiast, and recently won a James Beard Award for Best Chef Mountain Region, the first James Beard Award recipient from the state of Idaho. So thanks for tuning in today to Culinary Chats with Indulge Boise as we share some food for thought in a really soulful conversation with our special guest today, Kris Komori. Kris, thank you so much for joining us on the show. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Happy to be here. How are you, Angela?
Doing well, getting hungry just thinking about the conversation that we're about to have for sure. But I'm excited for a variety of reasons. And, you all know, as you're immersed right in the middle of it, it's an exciting time in Boise just in general, but it's a particularly exciting time in the culinary space. There's so many restaurants. I can't keep up with all of the new restaurants that are coming to fruition, all the new concepts, all the new neighborhoods who are getting exposure because of the culinary scene that is coming to their neighborhood. I'm curious for you that you're on the inside looking out. What's that experience like for you?
I mean, honestly, it's pretty exciting for us. This as a business within the restaurant industry, but also just kind of selfishly and personally, we still like to go out and eat. So we get to try new stuff and we get to learn from everyone that comes in. I think there's a semblance, maybe people from the outside or even within the industry might think that, oh, this is competition. But I would disagree with that and say, or at least it's friendly competition. It's pushing each other, but it's also allowing more space for young cooks to learn, bartenders, front of house, everyone, right? There's more opportunities to learn new systems and new techniques. So in a larger framework, I would say it's good because we can hopefully, as a valley, retain more talent and be training that within and not having all of our young go-getters, going off to bigger cities or whatnot, because they feel like there's not opportunities here. So having all these places, having them downtown, larger places, lots of cooks, it's a really exciting time.
Well, I want to delve into a couple of really key points that you just mentioned. One was the fact that there is this in an industry that feels like it is so competitive. And in every other market that I've lived in, from the Bay Area to New York City to Minneapolis with a vibrant culinary scene, there has been this sense of competition. But the thing that stood out to me when I first decided to launch Indulge Boise was that so often I would be in conversation with chefs or the restaurant owners, and they would say like, "Hey, do you have such and such restaurant on your tour? Hey, I would encourage you to work with them or to see if they can be part of your tour too." And it struck me as just quite odd in an industry where it is like I can't eat in two places in one evening, right? So I'm either going to this restaurant or that restaurant. But I like to call it here in Boise, it's co-opetition. It feels like there's this necessary relationship between the two. We help make each other better, but if we work together, we're actually going to elevate the level of understanding of quality culinary experiences that are going to help diners such as myself. Is that your sense of it? Competition is more of a co-opetition.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I mean, I think there is a little semblance or thought that like you are fighting over the same diners, but we all do different things,
Yeah.
and for the future or the current and the future growth of the food industry within Boise, we want diversity, and that's diversity within flavors, styles of restaurants. Are they fine dining? Are they small? Like they focus on one thing. There's a lot of space. There's a lot of lanes for people to come into. If everyone is doing the same thing, well, I mean, sure, there might be a little bit of competition within that. But even within the food, then there's like the setting of the ambiance of the place. And is it counter service? Is it more of a sit down? Is it casual? Like that kind of thing. So, yeah, there's tons of opportunity. And I would say that, turnover and retention of staff is an issue not just in restaurants, but like everywhere, right? And so everyone's trying to keep their staff that they invest in. But at the same time, there is still that in cooking and in restaurants where you, as a young up and comer, you do want to move around a little bit, because if someone's with us for a few years, maybe they've learned what they can glean from us, and ultimately what we want is for them to go to our trusted friends who own another place who also need help, but like we know that they're going to continue their education and continue to imprint their style, but also keep them in Boise, and that'd be the hope.
Yeah. Well, and one of the things you talk about, all the different aspects of differential, right? It is the experience you have as soon as you walk in the door of a restaurant. It is the decor. It is the ambiance. It is the setup and the food, the menu. And I think that is certainly something that surprised me and how it's being elevated over the last 5 to 7 years. I expected when I moved back here 8 years ago, steak and potatoes, like right, like that's what fine dining was going to be. And you at State and Limp and at Kin now have broadened that horizon. But I do want to delve further into this point that you make about your staff. Kris, one of the things and that has transpired over the last few years was a conversation I had with you before Food Forts, and it was pre-COVID, so it was probably around 2018, 2019, maybe at the latest. And you were talking about as you were shifting from State and Limp to Kin and had this vision for a new restaurant, how remarkable it was the number of staff that you were able to retain, and how important it was for you to have sustainable wages, right? Sustainable employment, and to support not just your staff, but the farmers and the ranchers and the folks that were supplying you with the food. Can you tell us a little bit more about that perspective that you have? Because I think you just mentioned it, that the importance of the emerging culinary scene here in Boise is giving your team members who may go from a dishwasher, such as how you got your start, to maybe being their own owner of a restaurant at some point because they have the chance to work throughout the ecosystem.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's probably a negative stigma about restaurants from being within it, that working in a restaurant isn't a real career or can't be a real career. There's a lot of part-time work that needs to be happening, and that kind of thing. So it's totally fine for it to be something that's playing alongside a larger career path that's outside of the industry. But at the same time, if people are interested in pursuing it, um, we are trying to help educate them and give them opportunities that other industries already have, right? So it's professionalizing an industry, and we don't feel like we're not looking to change other businesses. We're just looking at it from within ourselves. We believe in it very strongly, and can we experiment with different business practices and systems so that we can sustain supporting our crew in such a way? So for instance, yeah, we did have good retention, like we still do. We still get turnover here and there, but it's nice to see new faces. And we kind of, in a sense, we're happy when people leave because they're on to their new adventure.
Mm.
But part of it is, it's getting a livable wage. Most of our staff that's full time is salaried. That would be front and back of the house. But we protect those hours that they work, so they're not working the 60 hours. They're averaging like 45 to 47 hours in the kitchen, which for a kitchen salary is pretty good. They don't work service every night. They get PTO, they get healthcare. We teach them about financial investing, so we have people come in and teach them that. We do match IRAs, and we're a small place. We're 20 employees, but those are just baseline level things that are like these are the things that you should have where you work anywhere, right? So that you can build budget, financial stability. You can understand that piece of it, so that then when you're comfortable financially and still growing and learning on that, you don't have to worry too much about that stuff. You have balance in life, and then it frees you up for these like creative spots and really hunkering down into learning technique and things like that. So we're just trying to cover the base stuff and then educate a little bit more on top of that.
Which feels like it's unheard of, right, in the industry, right, that you actually could have a career in the culinary industry. And it also feels like there's some education that has to happen, not just with your staff or those that are interested in a career in the culinary industry, but also consumers, right? Part of that is with increased wages, with you compensating and taking care of team members so that they actually can live, right? There's also the effort of sourcing your ingredients locally, which means that your food costs are going to go up, and you're passing that on to the customer, the consumer. And I think in Boise, that's been a shift of what our perspective is about quality food and what goes along with quality food. We want great food, but I don't think that we've always been okay with the prices with great food. Like, how do you navigate that rocky terrain?
Well, yeah, I mean, there's a number of different ways that we combat it, right? It's not just one, it's a lot of little things. One thing in the kitchen is that our system of dining, at least on the kin side, but not necessarily on the art house bar side, but we've just learned the tricks of being efficient in our time, but and efficient in our purchasing and cost of goods and things like that. So we have very little waste, but it is kind of within the system where we have a set menu. We know how many guests are coming in per day, per week, and that allows us to order correctly, so that we don't have a lot of waste. There's less guessing game. In an a la carte restaurant, you never know how many people are going to come in. You never know what they're going to order, so you don't know how to you can estimate things. But ultimately, there can be a little bit of waste within that. So we're pretty tight on that, and so that helps us, right? So we can pay a little bit more because we're losing less of the product itself. The other side of it is we actually are fairly transparent about we have a service charge. So instead of raising our prices on the menu, what we decided to do was to add a service charge at the bottom line, pre-tax, and that is optional, but it is just called health and wellness. And we decided to do it that way instead of hide it into the menu because we wanted to have a conversation about it, which is this surcharge is meant to support our staff in terms of, well, earlier it was like PPE stuff. Now it's healthcare. And so we do put it on the diners a little bit, but the thing that we found is very, very few people have a problem with it. In fact, I think we've only had one person have a problem with it. And more than that, it's people that are applauding it a little bit. And again, it's the transparency for us. We want people to understand that it is not a 100% normal thing in restaurants, but we would like to get it as close to that as possible. And so they learn about it from us. They go into another place and they, maybe they ask questions, or maybe they just think about it a little bit more. So it's just unveiling some of the issues that we're having and hoping that people trust into that. And then I guess the last part is tied to that, and it's just building genuine relationships. It's with the farms, it's with fairs, with brewers, winemakers. It's with you. You know, it's like with the city. It's really important because people do understand the value of their dollar now more than even pre-COVID. I would say it's like changed quite a bit, and I think people genuinely believe in spending their money in good places, places that they connect with and they believe in, right? So we just have to be communicative about it and just let them know, like, yeah, we might be priced a little higher than another place, but it's for these reasons. Our bottom line is probably less than most other places, you know? So their support allows us to recontribute to our staff and the community.
Well, I applaud the transparency because I think that that is helpful, and it does, in a direct and indirect way, educate the consumer in a really important way to understand that all of these things in this city that we benefit from, right? The upside is that we will have the opportunity to have access to more of those types of resources if we do support in really tangible ways. And so I appreciate you all being on the front end of that and educating and informing by being so transparent. And I imagine that as well, one of the things that is helping so many get this introduction to what is happening here in the culinary scene is the global recognition that, and I can't believe it's this far in the show and I have not talked about the James Beard Awards, but Kris, congratulations to you, congratulations to your business partner Remy and your team and your ecosystem, your family, your wife, your kid, like, right, like for the work that you're putting in to put Boise on the map. And so I want to find out a little bit. I'm going to play a little video, and want to, as we're watching this video from the James Beard Awards that were held in Chicago. I know that you took most of your team members, if not all of your team members, but what was going through your mind as they were reading out the nominees for 2023, and then you heard Kris Komori from Ken Boise?
Well, it is a pretty funny story. We did bring our whole staff. So we fundraised for that. We got everyone out there, flew them out there, paid for it all, hotels, the lot. We were by far the largest group and therefore the loudest group. Nice. Everyone was very excited. I'd say right about this time in the video, they'd go to the nominees. Our crew screams and claps, you know, and whatnot. And everyone in the audience looks at us like, what's going on in Idaho, you know? And I saw him opening the envelope, but I didn't hear it or see the name. I just, like, our crew just jumped up, you know, and it was chaos. And I was like, well, we must have won, you know? So I started walking down here. And at a certain point, I was like, oh, I didn't actually hear or see my name. Like, is this the most embarrassing moment of my life?
A Kanye moment, right? Just play it off.
Yeah, I was like looking around. I was like, okay, I mean, I think it's that, you know? So it was surreal. I would say, like, I didn't write anything down, but I had some ideas. And it was probably better that I did that because it was like, it was hard to, it was like a dream, you know, like very surreal. And I was oddly calm up there. So it was a very strange experience. But you know what was cool is we backstage, and then we eventually went to an after party reception, and everyone in the theater went, right? And the president of the foundation and some of their crew pulled me aside and they said, congratulations, you know, but they said that the things that we spoke about, the fact that we brought our whole crew, like, those were the things that the foundation was looking to see in the culture of their places and in the places they want to promote. And they did say, you know, like, our crew, with the energy we had, we were kind of the talk of the night a little bit. So it was cool and humbling to represent the state. And honestly, it was great to have our friends at Amano in Caldwell there with us that night, because it's like, you know, and they're getting great press now too. And so it's cool to, like, stretch this all the way to the other side of the valley. And hopefully we can just, like, you know, keep spreading it a little bit.
Well, it's not even believable that you hadn't practiced that speech 20 times before, because it felt so natural. You did seem so relaxed. And, you know, so often in those moments, you see people just, like, can't get their thoughts together about who they want to recognize in their speech. And I just think you were so gracious in how you received that award and deflecting the attention from you to everybody in your ecosystem, to from your wife to your team members and staff, to just talking about the emerging culinary scene in Boise and the support that they're getting. So again, I just applaud. I have so much admiration for you and how you carry yourself, how powerful your voice is, but how gracious your perspective is in everything that you do. And this certainly was a special moment for those of us in this community who've kind of watched you over time. And I know that just the fact that you invited your team to be there to witness it as well was powerful, not just for them, but it's great to hear for everybody around the country to see what's happening in Boise and that we may do it differently here.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I don't really, I'm fine with a little bit of attention, but I don't necessarily like to be the center of it. It took me a little bit of like getting back into town afterwards and, like the news crews and everything. But it really was other business owners, other chefs, people with really integrated into the city that said, congrats, but thank you, because this is good for my business. This is good for the city. This is good for agriculture and tourism and all the stuff. And I was like, oh, that's really, really cool. And something that I can now latch onto, because again, it's like, it feels like it reverberated out so quickly that it helped sort of like unload some of the awkwardness that I was having with it. But there was a woman, and I can't remember when this happened, but she said something really interesting. She was like, I've never been a sports fan. And so I've never understood what it was to cheer for a team and have that team win until we watched you win it, like streaming live. And I was like, oh, that's so cool. Cause I never thought about us as like a business, having like the fans and like the whole team kind of culture and ecosystem. So that was, it was pretty cool to hear.
That is very cool to hear. A few years ago, I was in Austin for a conference for food tour operators, and the mayor of Austin came and just talked about the evolution of the food scene there, and that one of the things that he started to notice was when there was growth in the industry taking place, and a lot of investors were coming in, putting down money to basically buy customers, that there was pushback, and that it was those purveyors that started from the farmer's market and then maybe got a food truck and then eventually were able to find their way to a bricks and mortar location that the Austin locals wanted to support. And it feels like there's a little bit of that in Boise that could be happening in cheering for your home team, right? We got our Boise State Broncos and the Blue Turf and of course the U of I, but Ken and the restaurant scene and being on a national stage in a prominent place. And I wonder, one of the things that I've heard you say quite often is this concept of chef owned, chef inspired, right? And the distinction between that and investors coming in, because we're starting to see more private equity in the space. We're starting to see more investors in the space. What I love about Boise is that there aren't a lot of chain restaurants there in that downtown corridor. But from you being an insider, tell all of us little kind of adjacent to the culinary industry, like what that means, how important it is for us to have chef owned and chef inspired concepts.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a double-edged sword. There's two parts to it, right? So part of it for me is Akin is my first large scale business, like being an employer and all this stuff, and from the chef side of it, I know how to manage a kitchen, lead within that, but then the business aspect is this whole other world that I'm still pretty new to it and still learning it. But in terms of that, I think it's a training thing, like I learned from other chefs who owned the places. And I think part of what's special about those, and you're right, like I really like those places. I feel like they bring so much different energy. And it's because they have control over the style of the place. I mean, we kind of brought that up, how restaurants can have their own distinct food style, but ambiance and everything. And each one of them is so different, right? So like there's people from all over, they got experiences everywhere. And so if it's not like a cookie cutter franchise sort of menu that's copy and pasted, well, they have this like different sense of ownership of it, right? A different responsibility to a deeper connection to what they're putting out there because they're putting themselves out there. They're not putting someone else. So it just feels like realer and like, like there's a little bit more at stake, but there's also more to gain from it. And so it just has this kind of like bubbling excitement a little bit. And I would say that like while there are some places coming into town that maybe are from outside, private equity and that kind of stuff, there's a lot that are still connected here where it's they do hire chefs that are from here or from the state and from the area. It's our good friends across the street here at the Avery. So Cal, uh, he grew up here, went to Bora, and then moved to New York City and cooked for I don't know how a while. And he's got his own accolades, but he decided to come back, reinvest in a historic building, and now they're off and running. And like that kind of thing is super super cool.
Yeah, right. And it's about telling those stories. Right? I think that's both here locally and nationally, and so many people connect to those stories. One story that I connected to, Kris, was, and I remember having a conversation with you in the midst of the pandemic, when all restaurants, right, well, all businesses, but certainly those in the service industry, struggled because people weren't going out and dining. But you pivoted with the core business, but you also created this amazing concept and nonprofit that continues to give. Um, I would love for you to tell me more about City of Good and the work that you're doing there and the work that will continue.
Yeah. Well, Kin, the restaurant, we got occupancy of our building in March of 2020. So that was the day after City's
Hello.
restaurant got shut down. And it was interesting because we had just hired staff. We were actually racing to get a payroll out so that they could get unemployment. Um,
Wow.
and the beginning of City of Good was sort of me and Dave Crick at Bitter Creek and Red Feather and Diablo, and then some people that were at the time the directors of the Boise Co-op, and we were having these meetings every day. This was before we knew we shouldn't be having indoor meetings and whatnot. But the major concern was kind of three pillars. It was how do we support the farms? We were worried that if all these restaurants, all these wholesale accounts go away, then they've already planted the stuff. So what's going to happen now? So we wanted to support them. We wanted to bring restaurant workers, give them something, give them purpose, bring them back to work. Right? It wasn't just to pay them, but it was, I mean, mental health is an issue within the industry, and we wanted to make sure, like in a scary, dark time, that they had purpose, right? And then ultimately it was also just like feeding communities in need, And so it was this thing where we started by purchasing produce from farm. It would go to the restaurants. The restaurants would then repurpose it, make all these dishes. We would package them up, and then we would send them to the Boise School District, and then they would give them to kids that needed them over the weekend. And so they were getting nutritious food. They were getting fun food, something that they were actually interested in. We did tons of like surveys and polls to make sure that they are into it. And it just kind of continued to grow, and I think it was like an easy thing for people to really latch onto. But at the same time, it was incredibly enriching for our staff and all the cooks involved in the program. It was our restaurant, but then about 7 or 8 others at the beginning. And it kind of like reminded everyone like why they fell in love with cooking, was to nurture people, to comfort them via something a skill that we've learned over years. And then since then, now restaurants are back. We don't necessarily need to support the workers in quite the same way. The farms are doing well because it turns out the farmers markets started to blow up everywhere.
It's the cool thing to do, right? It's like
Yeah.
to go to the farmer's market on a Saturday.
But, there's still tons of food deserts and people that need produce. And so over the years, we've established an incredible and large board now that's directed us. We have an executive director, Britt, and she's been just like shooting this thing like a rocket. So it's really cool to see. We're still always food related, local food related, but we've found over the years a number of different pockets. So houseless communities, refugees that are coming in, we'll feed them, but we are also going through immigrant owned restaurants or stores because they know what's going to comfort them. I don't necessarily know a Syrian refugee what exactly is going to comfort them food wise, right? But so we make the relationships with those that do, and then we channel the money to them. We get them the product, and then they take it the rest of the way. So it's really, really cool, and it feels like every year we got this new momentum and push to other stuff. So
Well, it's so like I can feel like it's not just what you're saying and the story you're telling, but I just the look on your face, right? The pride that you have and the inspiration you have for the work that you're doing through the City of Good. And so kudos to you. We will make sure that in the show notes, all of you that are watching Culinary Chats with Indulge Boise find out more about City of Good, how you can help support this important mission that Kris and team and colleagues are continue to endeavor to do. Kris, you mentioned during that overview kind of what chefs fell in love with. And I wonder, as high achievers, high achievers are action oriented, results driven. So you focus on outputs, outcomes, objectives. But I wonder for you, what inspired you to get to where you are today and what continues to inspire you?
yeah, I mean, I think early on in my career, I just like the pace. I like the hustle and bustle. I do like times that can get a little stressful, heat of the moment type stuff. I still really like that. Although I would say that we are prepared enough that that doesn't happen too much. Um, I did go to culinary school, and at the beginning I had no plans on owning a business. In fact, I said that I would never own a business. It was just about learning the craft, And I would say for the first probably decade of me cooking, it was like honing the craft, learning different techniques, like really detail oriented stuff of like, why did this happen differently this time than 10 minutes ago, sort of thing. Cooking in general, especially on a professional level, there's repetition, there's muscle memory. It's very much similar to basketball, right? Like it's like you just got to go through the reps, you got to put the work in. But now, as a cook, I would say one of the most rewarding things is to watch someone eat your food, and they don't know you're watching, and they close their eyes and they savor it. Like that moment is like, oh, I made something, I created something that someone is enjoying. Whether they remember it or not in that moment, like that's it. And now that I got a team, and they're coming up at different levels, I can reflect back and be like, oh, you're at this stage of where I was in my life, but it's a little bit different because we give them opportunities to create dishes and take ownership of stuff. We talk to them, we learn about like, oh, maybe some are interested in writing as well, or in visual art, digital art. And so we say like, okay, you have opportunities to use that here with us. But then just as far as like actual dish creation, we have a 5-course, 7-course menu that we change every 5 weeks, and they're always themed. And each dish is inspired by something that kind of is under the umbrella of that theme. And we have a very talented kitchen now. So what we do is we sort of say, okay, here's the theme, here are the ideas, here's the list of ingredients that we can source, who wants to do what, and we start to send off dish ideas. And so each cook, we partner some of them up with others, and some can take them on their own because they're a little more experienced, but they get to put their own stamp on it. And then it's always a group brainstorm. So someone will bring a dish, everyone will try it. We'll say, like critiques here and there. And then we say, okay, this one's good. And then it establishes a part of the menu, and we then kind of adapt around that. So what I love now is seeing our crew feeling that joy of like creating something, and then hearing the feedback from our guests that are like, oh my God, I love that dish, and as much as they try to hide it, that they're feeling that like I did something, I created something beautiful. And they also are connecting with our guests. It's not just me, right? It's not like everyone thinks I'm doing anything. It's like we tell them, no, like this is Matt's dish, this is Erica's dish, this is Jordan's dish, and so we do that on purpose. One, so I don't have to do everything, but really it's more about like them learning and growing into it, and then getting out of their shell a little bit and developing their own style. And as long as we can make it work and flow, then we're the better for it, you know?
Yeah, there's so much about what you just said, Kris, that resonates with me for a variety of reasons. But I think about life imitating art, and the first thing was that industry, corporate America can learn from what you just shared about how you actually start to develop your team members, how you give them a chance to tap into their creativity through some simple processes that you put in place, and they're able to stretch right there the possibilities that they may even think that they're able to deploy. And so I love that. I think that there's a lot of correlation that business leaders can learn from what you just shared about your process at Kin. And I think the second thing is that who would have thought someone who doesn't like to cook, doesn't cook that often, could have something in common with a legendary award-winning chef. And that is, there's nothing for me, the few times that I do cook, when a family member or friend will ask, like, "So, what did you, which ingredients you put in? This is fantastic. This is delicious." Like, there's something about food, which is why I started Indulge Boise, is food connects us in a really powerful way, to the memories that we all share, and connect us in a time when it's really difficult to stay connected to others. And so it's good to know that there's that same experience that's important to kind of the casual chef as there is to an experienced and influential chef as well. But Kris, I'll tell you, I could talk to you all day and ask you a zillion questions, but I'm going to have to pause for a little bit. I just feel like I've savored every morsel of insight that you've shared, but it's time for a little bit of a breather as we continue to delve deeper into kind of our final course segment, where all of you that are listening will get a chance to find out a little bit more about Kris, kind of on a whole new level with some rapid fire questions that we have for Kris. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back here on Culinary Chats with Indulge Boise and our special guest today, Kris Komori. And we're here with the incredible Kris Komori, owner and chef at Kin and Art House Bar, one of the co-founders of City of Good. And he's been showing his extraordinary culinary stories, experience, his journey to where he is now, the award-winning recipient of the James Beard Award. But before we wrap up today's episode of the show, I actually think that we have a little treat in store for you, and it's time for our final course. And I like to think of our final course as not the end, but another way to put a gold star and finishing touch on something that's been fantastic. So, Kris, I have a few lightning round questions designed to give us a little glimpse into the heart and soul. So if you're ready to dive in, I guess the first thing is just like, I always get curious for people in a particular industry that are really good at what they do. You talked a little about your inspiration, but your memory, like one of your first food memories that you had, that you now can draw to you being inspired to be a chef. You think about kids that may be injured early in their life, all of a sudden they want to be doctors or nurses. I wonder if there's like a first food memory that you had, a moment from your past where food played a starring role in a memorable way.
Yeah, I would say I have a notoriously poor memory, but the ones that stick were always, they're family oriented, with my immediate family, but also with a little bit extended out. On my dad's side of the family, the joke is that when we get together for breakfast, we're talking about lunch, and then at lunch we're talking about dinner, and then dinner we're talking about tomorrow's breakfast, and that's been since I was a kid, and I remember going to dinner at my grandma's house. She didn't always cook super elaborate meals, but on occasion she would. And it was, as soon as we walk in the door, she somehow timed it perfectly. The things are just hitting the table. And there's a lot of traditional Japanese food. So there's just like dozens of plates of little things, share platters, all this stuff. And, it's just everyone sitting down together and passing plates. And I was probably 7, 8, and there's like a bunch of weird stuff, that maybe at the time I didn't really like, but it was just trying stuff, watching everyone enjoy the food, but more than anything is like they're enjoying the company. So that was definitely something that always stuck with me. And part of the reason why I wanted to get into cooking.
Mm. Well, I wonder if that also is connected to kin, right? Like I think about like obviously the meaning behind kin. It's family, it's familial, and I think about for me, my family was from the South, East Texas, and we always talk about comfort food. We had certain comfort food that just made you feel like you were at home, that you were loved, that you had that warm embrace. I'm wondering in those moments, right, when you would walk in the door of that house, is there a comfort food or a dish that reminds you of just being kin at home in comfort?
Yeah, I would say like back from that time, um, it was miso soup. I think soup probably hits on a lot of people's comforts. But that was just one of those things that we, no matter pretty much what meal it was with my grandmother, like there was always a little bit of that, and so it was just a yeah, such a consistent thing. And then at the same time, it's so simple that I think there's something that really endearing to that.
Yeah, yeah. For all of us that feel overwhelmed in the kitchen, is there a story that you can share with us where you had an epic kitchen disaster or something hilarious happens? Because I think we've all been there, but I just don't suspect that someone of your talent and caliber has been there as often as the rest of us.
Um, I don't know. I think like in the kitchen as well as other places, unfortunately, sometimes you learn from the mistakes more than
Mm,
you do the
yeah,
positive things, right?
yeah.
So I would say that I've made a lot of mistakes and failed at a lot of stuff. There's not any in particular that I remember, but when you work in a restaurant, there's what can go wrong will go wrong. I've definitely been in places where the power goes out, and unfortunately, this was actually when I was in college and I was working at a fondue restaurant, and it was super funny because we did most of the stuff with sternos, and then of course like the gas stove in the kitchen was fine, so we already had candles out everywhere, and so we were able to actually just like run an entire service with no power, um,
Wow.
which was pretty funny. um, but yeah, I mean, I've definitely been in a few services where plumbing goes wrong, or other things break down, and basically we have to shut the restaurant down that day, and they just feels like pure chaos in the moment, and you're letting everyone down at the same time, even though it's like something totally out of your control. um, but I think over time, I've learned that those are very soon those will be funny stories, and
Yeah.
so even in the moment it's kind of like you try your best, but
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I went to the Sun Valley Writers Conference this summer, and the thread that I pulled from so many of the authors when they were talking about their writing process was exactly what you just articulated, was this sense of Emily St. John Mandel said for her first draft is a disaster, and it's supposed to be that way. And each time, each draft gets better, and the gap to where the finished product is supposed to be closes quicker. And so that's what it sounds like, right? And so we just have to forgive ourselves when we're making those messes in our kitchen. Kris, I wonder for you, like I watched the show Chopped, right? And they have this basket of crazy ingredients. But I wonder, like, if you could only have three ingredients in your pantry and would be able to do whatever it is that you want to do in the world and have all these creative dishes, what would those three ingredients be?
Well, it'd be salt of some
Mm,
form.
okay.
Salt is a funny thing. Gets a little divisive in kitchens, but everyone has a feel for the a type of salt.
Okay.
So it's ours here is diamond crystal. And there's a while where it was really hard to get, and when we had to change salt, we noticed that people were over seasoning things because you're used to how it feels when you're dropping it into stuff.
Interesting. Okay.
So and then salt is just that thing. It, it preserves things. It cures. It elevates so many more of the other tastes that you got to be careful about over salting stuff. But everything needs salt in it, to bring a little bit more life out of it. On the
Okay.
same side, it would be some sort of acid. I mean, I think a lot of like citrus juice and stuff like that, but in a pantry, that's not going to really vibe that well over time. So probably a vinegar of some sort.
Okay.
Same thing. We're just kind of talking about basic, taste bud taste.
Yeah.
But I would say for most home cooks, like the things that we would say is it needs a little bit more salt. It needs much more acidity, right? It will help cut through fat. It will help kind of refresh your palate and brighten things up so that you aren't getting slogged in from bite to bite. You're actually like looking to go into more. Um, and then after that, a second a second one. I mean, I don't know. I don't think I could go a day at my own personal home with my children without having rice around.
Yes.
It's
Yes. A
like
start. Some kind of start.
every meal of the day they have rice. So, and that's by their choice. So, so for me personally, I think it would be rice as well.
Yeah. That's a great list. All right, some vinegar, some salt, and rice. I think that's a good combination. I'm going to add those to my pantry tomorrow. I think last question, Kris. Again, I could ask so many questions. I think you're such a fascinating individual and human being, and I appreciate your time, candor, and insights. I wonder what for you is as you see what's ahead in the culinary industry, what you see what's behind. What's the most surprising or unexpected thing that you've learned about food or cooking or the culinary industry?
Um, well, again, like I've always been attached to the camaraderie of restaurants, not even the places within it, but it's within the community of restaurants. I would say that something that I didn't really expect was how the connection of that was going to go outward to the guest and into
Mm,
the community. I mean, part of it is because of Top Chef and Chef's Table and all these shows. Like the people know so much more about the food that they're getting from where
sure.
it's coming from and all this stuff, and that the broad educational system within that is really good for a lot of restaurants, not every restaurant, but a lot of them. And um, I think like that side of it is really interesting, where it's like we don't just a chef doesn't just cook anymore, right? And plan menus. It's we have conversations like this. We're more integrated into the community than it was even when I was kind of coming up. It was starting back then. But now being multifaceted and really caring about why you're cooking and why you're putting that product out is more prevalent than ever. So that part of it, like being a little bit more on a stage and all that kind of stuff, I think has been more surprising to me at least.
Right. And that was that recent conversation that you were on a panel for, right? The creative economy, like, right? Like all these things that we used to think were adjacent to the real world or like, right, actually are impacting economic development in some really interesting ways. So this has been outstanding, Kris. I think your insights are just absolute gems, right? And you continue to bring such a wonderful finesse to this conversation around food. So I'm glad that this is where it's evolved over time, that people are more receptive to really understanding the impact that the culinary industry and those that operate within it have on the bigger picture and the greater landscape. And I know that I, for one, have gleaned so much from you. And I'm certain that our listeners here today have too. But before we bid adieu, I actually kind of want to think about is there anything else that you'd like to share? Any exciting projects that are in the pipeline that we all should be eagerly awaiting? Where can our audience find you and stay updated with Ken, City of Good, and everything else, Kris Komori?
Yeah, I mean, we don't have a ton of huge, large projects. We're getting a lot of offers, but for us, we want to simplify, become efficient, and like kind of tighten things up a little bit. As the weather gets a little cooler, the Art House bar will kind of start cranking a little bit more. We'll bring all the hot noodles back, like our ramen type dishes and stuff like that. So we make all the noodles in house with grain, like drought tolerant grain that we get from up in Bellevue at a farm called Hillside Grain, and so that's why we make them in house. So we're like really proud of that. And then ultimately, it's that soup thing, like it'll get cold. We got hot noodles down there, so we're just sort of like revamping some of that. We have our bar ampersand. That's actually where I am right now. That's up on the 14th
Cool
floor.
vibe.
So yeah, it's got a great view of the foothills. We're in the One Capitol building, so Ninth and Main. And I have an Instagram account, but I'm not really the one you should be following. So Kin and Art House are up on there, as well as City Good. And City Good, has a beautiful website and a lot of opportunities to not just support financially, but there's a ton of volunteer opportunities that can be really, really enriching. And again, it's just like connecting with all these other people via food. So
awesome. Well, Kin is a must visit, an art house bar, as well as Ampersand. Like I said, a great view of the city. And it feels like that speakeasy sort of thing is really vibing here in Boise. And that fits into that kind of, small space, cool vibe, place to be, great social media um, photos that you can have. So, well, Kris, thanks again for joining us on Culinary Chats with Indulge Boise. It has been such a delight being in conversation with you, and here's to more enlightening conversations in the future.
yeah. Oh, well, thanks so much for having me. This has been really fun.
Awesome. Well, if you found today's conversation with Kris Komori as enriching as I did, don't forget to hit that subscribe button to keep up with our culinary journey as we continue to explore all the amazing things that are taking place here in Boise, the Treasure Valley, and certainly throughout Idaho. And for Angela Taylor, your host here on Culinary Chats with Indulge Boise and our team, that's a wrap for this episode. Until next time, happy indulging to you all.
Hey everyone, I'm Kris Komori, chef and co-owner of Kin Restaurant downtown Boise, and I was just on an episode of Culinary Chats with Indulge Boise. I highly recommend that you subscribe. The support of the show and just enjoyment of the conversation kind of goes beyond Indulge Boise, goes beyond us at Kin. The more that we can support food and those who love food in the Valley, I think it's important. So I implore you to tune in, listen, and enjoy.